I'm losing my.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast, brought to you as always by the GSMC Sports Network. Hope you guys enjoyed that first segment. Before we switch into our second segment, I do want to remind you guys yet again that if you do feel so inclined, please consider leaving a link at the description, gsmc.cloud. Any questions, comments, or concerns can go there as well, and they will be answered and addressed at the beginning of the next episode. We also now have the ability to super chat and super thanks with you guys. So if you leave in the comments, and this is a pre-recorded show, any super thanks, I will address them as well at the beginning of the next episode. Without further ado, let's jump right into our first prop bets deep dive of the day. We're going to finish out the AFC East. We had some AFC East segments in terms of prop bets yesterday, and now we are finishing up with the last two teams. We're going to start off with the better of those two, the much better of those two, should I say, in the Miami Dolphins, a team that's actually really expecting to perhaps win the AFC East this year. They certainly have the pieces tied down. They tied down Tua, they tied down Tyreek, and now they look better than ever. They got to hope that their defense, especially those linebackers, stay healthy in Bradley Chubb and Jalen Phillips. But overall, this is a team that definitely can compete to win the AFC East and maybe make a deep run in the postseason if they don't play in any cold conditions, if you know what I mean. Now, when I think about what I love about the Miami Dolphins, is that a lot of their offensive mindset stems from the genius of Mike McDaniel. Mike McDaniel could have just put all that speed on a field and just said, hey, all these guys are going to go deep. We're going to trust them beating people, and Tua, your job will be easy. But no, he understands the nuances so well of how to utilize speed and when, and also how to get the best out of Tua at the QB position now. I think that now is the time for the Dolphins to have their offensive scheme fully realized as something that can be a force to be reckoned with. The Chiefs started doing it a little bit when Tyreek Hill was still with them, and now I feel that the Miami Dolphins want to infuse this kind of speedy mindset infused with nuanced play calls to really try and dominate the AFC. They still are a little ways away. There are still some teams that I would consider ahead of them, maybe even two teams in their division now, in the Bills and the Jets. But at the end of the day, the Miami Dolphins are still going to be in the conversation in the AFC. Let's start off with their over-unders in terms of wins. They're at 9.5 wins. Pretty appropriate for this team, I would say. And I think that all comes down to whether or not this offense stays healthy. Last year was the defense that really gave them troubles when Jalen Phillips went down and Bradley Chubb went down, even Jalen Ramsey missing most of the season with injury. But at the end of the day, the offense is what really makes this thing tick here. I think the offense has the bar for the defense, if that makes any sense. When we saw it in the 70-point beatdown of the Denver Broncos, I really think a lot of their game plan was just predicated. And to be honest, the Denver Broncos defense was terrible at that time, but still, it was predicated on beautiful play calling, the incorporation of the speed they have. It's one thing to have that speed, like I said. It's another thing to have the knowledge to utilize it well. And so, I think this total can easily be met. The Dolphins do have a tougher slate than people think. I think the NFC West is definitely a tough NFC conference to play, or division, rather. But at the end of the day, playing 6 games with the AFC East is much better than playing 6 games against, say, the AFC West, where you have to play with Chiefs, and the Chargers and Raiders are very gritty, physical teams that might drag you into their game plan. So the Dolphins have it a little bit easy because they know who their opponents are. And they know that in order to really make a statement, they have to beat both the Bills and perhaps the Jets now. So At the end of the day, I'm taking the over here, but there's a little bit of a caveat. I think this year the defense will actually stay healthy. I think that Bradley Chubb, Jalen Phillips, Jalen Ramsey will all stay on the field, and it will be one of the more vaunted defenses in the league. And the questions are always going to be about the offense as well. If Tua stays on schedule and proves to still be accurate, if Tyreek Hill does not get injured, if Jalen Waddle becomes more competent this year, then I believe that this team can be a force to be reckoned with in the AFC East. At the very least, I think they can make a playoff run, like I said, if they avoid that cold weather. But I think that at the end of the day, realistically, when you look at this offense, you can't get past the fact that this looks like a 9-11 win team. Now let's look at a player who I've spoken about countless times for the Miami Dolphins in terms of whether he will show some even more progression or whether he will kind of regress. And so Devon Achane is definitely going to be a player to really key in on if you're a fan of the Dolphins, or whether you're a betting enthusiast, or someone who plays fantasy and wants a good second option off the bench. Because Devon Achane last year really was kind of the whole chess piece of the McDaniels system. Because you had Mostert, who kind of has a very sneaky speed. He's better with his speed after contact, I would say, for Raheem Mostert. Devon Achane is a blend of power and speed, who's more workmanlike, but at the end of the day can really break out and get those big chunk runs that we saw from him last year. But this year, I don't necessarily think that will be the case, because in order to sustain this kind of offense, I do feel like Mike McDaniel will have to tweak the way he views the running game. Because Devon Achane is nice to have, but in all reality, at the end of the day, more teams will key into defending that run scheme than, say, trying to figure out a way to contain both Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. And so, if I'm Mike McDaniel, I'm thinking I have to be a lot more patient with my rushers. And so I'm looking at Achane's over-under in terms of rush yards, and it sits at 775.5 total yards, much lower than what people would have expected coming into the season, based off of last season for Achane. And so I do believe that Achane is not going to be a quote-unquote flash in the pan where he's just going to disappear from the public eye and he's not going to have any sort of playing time. No, he's still a useful piece. It's just that I believe that he will be utilized less and in more different situations. There's not going to be as much emphasis, I think, placed on trying to stick with the run game when it's going well. Because Mike McDaniel is always going to try and find variation. He's always going to try and find ways to adjust and ways to improve. And so I think that while Achane certainly is someone to keep an eye on and pay attention to in terms of a lot of different things, I think that he's not necessarily going to be the same kind of quote-unquote emergency weapon he was last year that really got so many chunk runs that were able to catch people's eyes. In only 11 games, he did have over 7.84 yards per attempt, and so that also kind of speaks to what they did with him. It kind of speaks to how he really came onto the scene, and I don't think that's going to carry over. Let's talk about Week 1. The Dolphins play the Jags in Week 1, a Southern game, in-state game. But I think that this game really could be an intriguing one because, in all reality, I could see this as a potential playoff matchup. Say the Dolphins somehow get the number 1 seed, I'm not saying it will happen, but let's just hypothetically put it out there. Would it be too ambitious to consider the Jags the 7th seed? Say that Houston wins the division, right? Houston fits in around the 3 or 4 seed. I think that the Jags potentially could slide into the 7th seed. If you think about it, the AFC North is going to beat each other up. So potentially only one team from there will advance. Maybe 2. There's a place for some madness to happen. And if any division is more even than others and can actually get more teams to the postseason, I would say that AFC South. I would say that the Texans, the Colts, if Richardson is really who we think he is, and the Jags all have a conversation to be had to get into the playoffs. And so I think this could be a very interesting and telling game, both for the Dolphins and the Jags. For the Dolphins, though, I'm taking the points with them. They're at minus 3.5. I think this game will just be about, whether or not Mike McDaniels can truly employ many different ways. I want to see a lot of different looks as to what the Dolphins could be this year. Because last year, they kind of switched more to the running game, and it did help them in spurts. But when they focus on the passing game, I think that's where they can really shine. And so, it's the Jags and the team that's trying to stay in the conversation. If the Dolphins can set the tone against them, that will be a kind of precursor for things to come, and potentially a warning shot to the entirety of the AFC that these are not the Dolphins who we thought they were going to be. This is a more balanced Dolphins team. And I think there's a lot more incentive to this. I think that the Dolphins organization is realizing that Tua and Tariq are integral to how the team will open up and expand their offense. So by tying them down, that really adds an incentive to start winning and start winning fast, because they don't want to fall behind this crowded AFC pack. So I'm taking the points for the Dolphins. I'm taking the over in terms of wins, and Achane is going to be a mystery man this year. I think the Dolphins are going to be a very excitable team to bet on, and it's up to you. But coming up after this break, we're going to be talking about perhaps the worst team in the AFC East. I'm sorry, New England Patriots fans. It was a great ride when you had Brady, but we have to talk about them. We'll be right back to do so after this quick break.